Children's books. Although I have never written a children's book, sometimes people ask me for advice on this topic. For example, a family friend asked me to look at the manuscripts of two children's books which she had written. What she had written I liked, and I told her so. Then my friend told me that she needed to get her book illustrated. Of course, I know nothing about illustrating books. Indeed, the only thing I know about this topic is that an amazing lady creates my book covers. Eventually, I received a phone call from my friend. She told me that she didn't want to self-publish her book. Instead, she wanted to publish her book through a company that I had never heard of. Well, that was quite a while ago, and I still don't think she has published her book. However, my friend does spend a ridiculous amount of time on Facebook. The bottom line is that if you want your book to be published, then you will need to make that your priority. Now let's look at some examples of great children's books. The first book that I learned how to read was Go Dog Go. What an amazing book that was and still is. In fact, I love that book so much that I just read it again. Indeed, I'm still happy when I see the two dogs riding off into the sunset. So if you're going to write a children's book, make sure that it's a memorable one. Also, remember that a book which is good for a 6-year-old might not be interesting to an 11-year-old. Back in the old days, when I was in the 4th grade, we would often read books together as a class. You may not believe this, but my teacher was a long-haired hippie who had a fantastic beard. In fact, Mr. Kapler was my teacher for both the 4th and 5th grades. Although my mother wasn't happy with Mr. Kapler's teaching methods, I still think that he was a great teacher. One of the books that we read together in Mr. Kapler's class was The Hobbit. Needless to say, I loved this book. Another children's book which I enjoyed reading in grade school was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The author, Roald Dahl, knocked it out of the park when he wrote that book. Let's be honest, every child would love to hang out in a chocolate factory. Indeed, if I didn't have acid reflux, I would still want to hang out in a chocolate factory. The bottom line is that Dahl figured out what children wanted and he gave it to them. Of course, in Dahl's book, all the naughty children are punished for being spoiled brats. Thankfully, though, there's one good child named Charlie, so naturally he was rewarded for his good behavior. For those of you who want to write children's books, you should read some of the popular ones which have already been written. Obviously, though, I don't want you to plagiarize those books. However, there's nothing wrong with being inspired by great authors. So, if you're looking for a muse, then let famous authors be your inspiration. In fact, you can also be inspired by authors who may never be famous. Indeed, the beauty of writing is that it allows you to think new thoughts. As useful as writing is, though, you're still going to need to do some writing. So if you haven't started writing your children's book, then today is the best day to start. Don't wait until tomorrow or next week. Instead, start right now. Now let's get back to figuring out how to write a fantastic children's book. Probably the first science fiction book that I read was A Wrinkle in Time. Of course, I'm not the only one who has read this book. Indeed, A Wrinkle in Time has also twice been made into a movie. Since the movies were poorly made, it makes more sense to read the book. A Wrinkle in Time was written by Madeline L. Ingle. Naturally, though, all the gatekeepers in those days hated the book and didn't want to publish it. Despite their resistance, L. Ingle's book was published in 1962. The main character in the story is Margaret Murray, who is also known as Meg. Although Meg is a good kid, she spends a lot of time feeling sorry for herself. In fact, to say that she lacks self-esteem would be an understatement. However, Meg does deserve some sympathy since her father has mysteriously disappeared. Naturally, though, all of the town gossips have assumed that her father has run off with another woman. Thankfully, Meg's father isn't that kind of a man. As you read this book, you will discover that family means everything to Meg. For example, she gets in one hell of a fist fight with a boy because he talked bad about her brother. Indeed, when you see how much Meg cares about her family, it's enough to bring a tear to your eye. You're probably wondering, where is the science fiction in this story? Well, there's plenty of science fiction in this story. However, I want you to read this book so that you can discover how to write a great children's book.